Yamuna Tira Brahmachari Yamuna Tira Brahmachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Action and worship of the Buddha in temple. By executing this process, one can orient himself to be at the body of the soul. Then, Canto 84, first chapter, first mention of Srimad Bhagavatam is told how the Dana, an infinite friend of Krishna, while going to the house of the Brahmin, murmured to himself, simply by wishing Krishna one can simply achieve all the results of having the opulence reservation for eternity over the bountiful systems of universe, all the opulence of the people were then multiplied for forming the system.
Definitely. The cities and the Aishwaryas that you can achieve by worship of everybody else, you get it from worshiping Krishna.
In fact, you get more than that. The events leading to Sudama's murmuring this statement are as follows. Sri Krishna had ordered his friend Sudama to go to a Brahmin's house and ask for some food. The Brahmins were performing a great sacrifice, and Sri Krishna had told Sudama to plead with them that he and Balaram were feeling hungry and needed some food. When Sudama went there, the Brahmins refused to offer anything, but the wives some food immediately took many palatable dishes and went to offer them to Sri Krishna in the Vishnu Rahasya. Also, it is stated, any person within any person within this world who is engaged in the worship of Vishnu can very easily achieve the ever blissful kingdom of God. By executing this process, one confirms himself
Tasmin katam tavagatim Tasmin katam tavagatim vimrishami dina. Naitan manas tava katasuya vikuntanata. Sampriyate durita dushtam asadu tivram. Kamaturam harshashoka bhayaishanatam. Tasmin katam tavagatim vimrishami dina. Naitan manas tava katasu vikuntanata. Sampriyate durita dushtam asadu tivram. Kamaturam harshashoka bhayaishanatam. Tasman katam tavagatim vimrishami dina. Chant. Anyone else? No, certainly not. Etat, this, mana, mind, tava, your, katasu, in transcendental topics, Vaikunthanata, O Lord of Vaikuntha, where there is no anxiety, Sampriyate, is pacified or interested in, Durita, by sinful activities, Dushtam, polluted, Asadu, dishonest, Tivram, very difficult to control, Kama aturam, always full of different desires and lusty propensities, Harshashoka, sometimes by jubilation and sometimes by distress, Baya, and sometimes by fear, Eshana, and by desiring, Artam, distressed, Tasman, in that mental status, Katam, how, Tava, your, Gatim, transcendental activities, Vim Rishami, I shall consider and try to understand, Dina, who am most fallen and poor. Translation, my dear Lord of the Vaikuntha planets where there is no anxiety, my mind is extremely sinful and lusty, being sometimes so-called happy and sometimes so-called distressed. My mind is full of lamentation and fear. and it always seeks more and more money. Thus it has become most polluted and is never satisfied in topics concerning you. I am therefore most fallen and poor. In such a status of life, how shall I be able to discuss your activities? Please repeat, my dear Lord of the Vaikuntha planets, where there is no anxiety, my mind is extremely sinful and lusty, being sometimes so-called happy and sometimes so-called distressed. My mind is full of lamentation and fear, and it always seeks more and more money. Thus it has become most polluted and is never satisfied in topics concerning you. I am therefore most fallen and poor. In such a status of life, how shall I be able to discuss your activities? Srila Prabhupada's purport. Here, Prahlad Maharaj represents himself as a common man. Although he actually has nothing to do with this material world, Prahlad is always situated in the Vaikuntha planets of the spiritual world. But on behalf of the fallen souls, he asks how, when his mind is always disturbed by material things, he can discuss the transcendental position of the Lord. The mind becomes sinful because we are always engaged in sinful activities. Anything not connected with Krishna consciousness should be understood to be sinful. Indeed, Krishna demands in Bhagavad Gita 1866, Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja, aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha yishyami ma suchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful action. Do not fear. As soon as one surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Krishna immediately relieves one of the reactions of sinful activities. Therefore, one who is not surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord should be understood to be sinful, foolish, degraded among men, and bereft of all real knowledge because of atheistic propensities. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7.15. Namam dushkritino mudha prapadyante naradama mayaya pritagyana asuram bhavam ashrita. Therefore, especially in this age of Kali, the mind must be cleansed, and that is possible only by the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. In this age, the process of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the only method by which to cleanse the sinful mind. When the mind is completely cleansed of all sinful reactions, one can then understand his duty in the human form of life. The Krishna consciousness movement is meant to educate sinful men so that they may become pious by simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kaluna nascheva nascheva, nascheva gatiranyata. To cleanse the heart so that one may become sober and wise in this age of Kali, there is no value to any method other than the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Prahlad Maharaj has confirmed this process in previous verses. Tvadvirya Gayana Mahamrita Magnachita. Prahlad further confirms that if one's mind is always absorbed in thought of Krishna, that very qualification will purify one and keep one purified always. To understand the Lord and his activities, one must free his mind from all contamination of the material world, and this one can achieve by simply chanting the Lord's holy name. Thus one becomes free from all material bondage. Om Gantamarandasya Ganjana Salakaya Chakshunmulatamyana Tasmai Shigurave Namaha Kam Kroti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Girim Yat Kripatam Ham Vande Shigirim Dinatarnam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Shri Advaita Gadadhar Siva Sadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. My dear Lord of the Vaikuntha planets, where there is no anxiety, my mind is extremely sinful and lusty, Being sometimes so-called happy and sometimes so-called distressed, my mind is full of lamentation and fear, and it always seeks more and more money. Thus, it has become most polluted and is never satisfied in topics concerning you, and therefore most fallen and poor. In such a status of life, how shall I be able to discuss your activities? So it's very interesting that he begins this verse by addressing the Lord of the Vaikuntha planets, where there's no anxiety. So he's making a comparison that the Lord is pure and his abode is pure, and all the living entities there, they're free from this sinful desires, lusty desires. Their mind is pure, and they're not affected by the duality of desire and hate, or happiness and distress. In the material world, the very thing which brings you happiness brings you distress. We become attached to something because we're learning what's the first principle of brahmacharya life is nirmama, nothing is mine. And this is stated in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada mentions, nothing is mine. So before we can utilize things in Krishna's service, we have to first understand that nothing is mine. And that's a good starting point. And then from that point, then we can start to engage. So some devotees, when they joined the temple, they actually gave up everything physically because they wanted to be in that position where they actually understood they had nothing and become dependent on Krishna. And then as they be given facility, they see this has been given by Krishna to use in service. In the material world, people become happy in their situations. Srila Prabhupada refers to this as Hridaya Granti. So, typically, one has to maintain the physical body, so they have to get a job. That's natural, there's nothing wrong with that. And nothing wrong with anything, what I'm going to say, except for if it's not in relation to Krishna, then it is a source of bondage. Karma bandhana. Any work which is done in this material world which doesn't have a relation to the Lord, is not done as a sacrifice to please Vishnu, Yajnavai Vishnu, then it leads to bondage. So we get a job, and we have the story of Ekdoti. Everybody knows the story, right? Ekdoti, one doti. Just briefly, I think it started off as Ek Kopen, but they couldn't quite do that as a drama, so they had to call it one doti. Can you imagine if devotees are always wearing his Kopens on the stage? Wouldn't be so decent. So the yogi starts off with one pair of Kopens, but rather than going through the discomfort of wearing those wet Kopens when he bathes every day, then he gets another pair. He thought, well, if I get two pair, I can hang one up to dry while the other ones, the clean ones I'm wearing, and each day I'll have clean Kopens without having to wear wet ones. And then the rat comes to nibble, or the mouse comes to nibble the ones that are hanging up to dry, and then he gets a bit anxious, so I better get a cat to keep this mouse away from my Kopens. So that works. But then, Hridaya Granti, a knot. So the first knot is, I need another pair of Kopens. And then when you tie that one knot, then there's a problem because the mice are at it. So let's tie another knot on top of that. We get the cat to keep the mouse away. Meow wants milk. Need to get some milk, so get a cow, another knot. The cow needs milked. Get a milkmaid, need another knot. Milkmaid needs a house, needs a husband, get married, get a house, get kids, get a job. So this is knot on top of a knot on top of a knot. And the only way to be released from that is when the sadhu comes and cuts Sometimes a knot is too difficult to get out and you end up just cutting it out. You can't fathom it out. It's too much. You can't fathom it out. So sadhu means to cut, but he doesn't cut with a rusty, blunt blade. He cuts very sharply and with compassion. And he's cutting with the sword of knowledge. He's not simply just blutering or obliterating. He's cutting with the sword of knowledge so that the disciples released from ignorance by the words of the spiritual master. He doesn't just like shout at them and expect, that's you freed. Sometimes he might shout because I remember Hridayananda Maharaj giving a lecture many years ago, and it was, I think it was in Mumbai, and there's some students there, and they were quite materialistic, and there was an argument going on, and he was raising his voice, and he said, "No, Swamiji, you don't need to shout." He said, "I'm shouting because you're not listening." And the main argument at that time was they were talking about technology, and he asked, "Was there food before technology?" And they wouldn't answer the question, so he just kept them to that point. "Answer my question, was there food before technology?" And then finally they listened. "Oh, Swamiji, you don't need to shout." And then they admit, yes, there was food before technology. Because they were trying to evade the question. They knew if they answered the question, then they were caught. And this is the thing, is like sometimes people put forward questions or they put forward some obstacle because they don't really want to hear what is the answer. This is so many myriad methods of defending. But in this purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about not defending but surrendering. And we're afraid to surrender. That's why Krishna says, "Do not fear." So when we're in that position where we're feeling fear to surrender, then just surrender and overcome that fear. Sometimes we're afraid to surrender because we're attached to the result. And we're thinking, "Oh, I can't do that." Or we're listening to the mind telling us that we can't do that. But simply if we try, we can do it in some form or another. So typically, when someone becomes attached to something, then that attachment Jayato Visham Punsham Sangaste Shupajayate, it goes to kama, to lust. When one is contemplating the objects of the senses, one develops attachment for them. This is the process of entangling in the material world. And from such attachment, lust develops. So when we become attached to something, just like people, they're in work all week, earning money, and they want some relief, they want some pleasure, so they go to the shops in the city or their online, whatever method they use to try to see what is there in this world that I can enjoy. I've turned my time in to pay, now how am I going to enjoy that? And what is that they're trying to enjoy? They're trying to take their mind off of the misery of the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Many years ago, there was a punk band who wrote a song called 48 Hours, and it was basically showing that 48 hours means 48 thrills, which means in the weekend, people work all week, and then at the weekend, they just want to forget the week by getting intoxicated or trying to enjoy or distracted in some way or another. But then it comes around again. So, of course, this is because people are doing things they don't like to. They have no purpose. If someone has purpose in life, then they can work. They can work, but the purpose in life is to be Krishna conscious. And Krishna explains that one cannot maintain one's physical body without work. Therefore, for people who think coming to the temple to escape getting a job, then they're in for a surprise. Because temple is not a place for lazies, Prabhupada said. He didn't want that. Otherwise, what happens, it just becomes a burden. This is also mentioned that a sannyasi should not be a burden on society simply by taking. They must be giving transcendental knowledge in return. So, Prabhupada would sometimes say this movement is a movement of sannyasis. Sometimes they say a movement of paramahamsas. So when we're following the Krishna conscious lifestyle, then this is a lifestyle of very elevated souls. And we may not be on that platform to begin with, but by acting according to that, then gradually we're being elevated to that. Just like one may be a kanista adhikari, materialistic person, but as soon as you step into a position of preaching, of distributing Krishna consciousness, of sharing Krishna consciousness, then you're elevated to the platform of Madhyam Adhikari. Because a Madhyam preaches, Kanista is concerned with their own liberation, and a Madhyam, they're concerned with others. And even if we're not so concerned with others to begin with, by doing that, then gradually we'll become purified, so that we do become, we see their suffering. We see that they think they're enjoying, this is Maya, that which is not. They're thinking they're enjoying, but actually it's not enjoying, it's suffering. And even they appear to be enjoying, they're enjoying their senses, but we're not seeing the suffering is that later on, karma will call and say, okay, you owe this much. You killed, in the lifetime, you killed 108 cows, 500 pigs. Oh, I never killed any of them. Yeah, but you ate them, so somebody had to kill them for you, and you paid for it. So many things which people will be accountable for, maybe enjoying now, but in a few short years, then it won't be such a happy time for them. So the devotees see this, they see through the eye of Shastra, through the eye of Scripture, Shastra, Chakshu. And seeing like that, they don't just see here and now where someone is momentarily enjoying, and we don't become envious of them thinking, oh, I wish I was enjoying. That's foolish. We have to remember the Shastra, that they're enjoying now. But the time will come where there'll be that harsha will become shoka, that happiness will turn to distress. Even in this lifetime, sometimes that's what happens, is someone amasses some wealth and then something happens, they lose it. And then they're in distress because they feel that vacuum, they become dependent on that lifestyle. So therefore, a devotee is always happy in whatever situation they're given. And we always found that, particularly devotees who have experienced travelling Sankirtan, they'll accept some nice situation if it's given, but they're thoroughly acknowledge that they can live very simply. For years, sometimes the devotees would live out of nothing more than a couple of carrier bags. That would be their possessions. And you see sometimes even materialists, they want to experience this minimalistic lifestyle because they feel overburdened by material possessions. And what do they want in exchange for things? They want experience. That's what they're looking for. So they might still have a job, and instead of just improving their material lot by getting a bigger house or a fancier house or a bigger, better car, then they keep it very simple and they utilize their money for going on adventure holidays or various other things. So it still has a material enjoyment aspect. And what happens if there's one guy who, of course, they're depending on their health to enjoy this experience, and then if they've no health, then what do they have? If they're stuck in their house with nothing in it, what they're going to do with their material desires? So no amount of material adjustment will really satisfy the soul. The soul has to connect with Krishna, and the way to do this is we've been recommended as Harinam, Harinam, Harinam eva kevalam kalonaschiva nischiva gatiranyata. There is no other method of connecting with Allah, with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is more effective in this age of Kali than the chanting of the holy names. So therefore, to immunize ourselves against the effects of Kali Yuga, then Satatam Kirtayantomam, Prabhupada said minimum 16 on the beads, unlimited off the beads. So we can be chanting all the time. Therefore, a devotee is never bored. Even sometimes it happens that a devotee is waiting on getting picked up, and then the car breaks down or something, then they're stranded for 3 or 4 hours. And normally a materialist would get a bit anxious about that. But a devotee just think, okay, good, I get a chance to do some extra reading, or I can chant some extra rounds. They don't get an anxiety, they just take advantage of the time. A devotee doesn't like to waste time. They know that padam padam yadvi padam nate sham, danger every step. So let me just always endeavour to be Krishna conscious. Let my body be used for the temple. So is it the first canto? Talks about the lungs which don't chant the holy name or which don't glorify the Lord are simply no more than the blacksmith's bellows. And the eyes which don't see the Lord are like the eye in the peacock feather, which looks like an eye but it sees nothing. And the legs which don't take the body to the temple are like tree trunks. And arms, anyone remember that? What's the arms?
Arms of a dead person.
Arms of a dead person. So it's important that we learn these things, that we're utilising everything. When we're reading these books, then we're realising this is what we're doing. We become conscious that we're utilising our working senses, our knowledge-acquiring senses. We're using all these things, gross and subtle material bodies, in the service of Krishna. And by associating with Krishna through this, because Krishna is Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan, he's the supreme pure and supreme abode of all living entities, then we become affected by that association in a positive way. By associating with Krishna, because Krishna is pure, we become pure. So devotees don't have to be full of lamentation and fear. If we find ourselves being desirous of something, then it means that simply we forgot to be appreciative of what we have. I found that myself. If I start to lament that this could have been, or that could have been, or I could have had this, I could have done that, if I get into the mode of ignorance, which is every day, then you think, if only this, but there's no need for that. But we appreciate what we have. If we're in the material world, we think, I could have been this, I could have done that, I could have had this. But also you could have been dead by now. You could have been a disaster, you could have been behind bars, who knows. An example, there was where the town I came from, Cumbernauld, there was a group of us who were becoming interested in spiritual life, and some were passing the Prabhupada's books around, and some people were going to visit the temple. Some had become devotees, and some were reading the books, but they hadn't become devotees. And there was one boy who came to visit the temple, and it looked like he was going to join, but he decided not to, and he went back to his other life. And within a few weeks, we'd heard that he was involved in a motorbike accident, and he was paralysed from the neck down. And immediately I was thinking, if he'd only made the decision to stay at the temple when he came to visit with the mood to join, but changed his mind. He already understood enough. Maybe not enough, otherwise he may have joined. But then I'm sure that he would not have been in that situation because he would have given up his motorbike for a start. And being under the shelter of Krishna, then he would no longer be a vulnerable living entity at the merciless hand of Maya. And when friends went to visit him, they were taking him and they were sneaking him in drugs and things like that, thinking they were doing him some good. Such charity in a mode of ignorance. He's lying there, paralysed, and they want to give him some intoxication. So this is also good, that if there is fear, then they should be afraid of Maya. We should be afraid that if I leave the shelter of Krishna, what will become of me? Better that I stay in the shelter of Krishna. And not just physically, but if we leave the shelter of Krishna, then we don't know how many births again it will be before we get the chance that we have just now. Atmanivednam Swami once gave a class here where someone was talking about, well, I'll just do a bit of service and I'll pick up from where I left off the next life. It'll be a better situation. And he pointed out, there is no better situation than you have now. You've got Prabhupada's books, you've got the Holy Name, you've got deities, you've got Charnamrita, you've got association, you've got the deities Maha, Prasadam, you've got service, everything's there. You've got it now. Who's to say you will have all that in the future? And of course, if we do decide, say for example, we stop now and say, okay, that's it. It's been nice at the temple, but I'm off to enjoy now. Thanks, see you guys some other time. Then what happened is we start to accumulate some more karmic reactions. And the point at which we didn't surrender, that we come back to devotee association, we have to clear all that stock of bad karma, and then again come to the point where we didn't surrender to see, are you going to surrender this time? So all these little surrenders we're making, we're progressing along the path. And each time we think we can't make it, then just consider, perhaps this is where I stopped the last life. Let me not stop again. Carry on. And each time you do that, you might be saving yourself another birth, another birth, another birth. And finally, when we learn the process of surrender, then the time of death comes, then that ocean of Maya will be no more difficult to cross over than the water contained within the hoof print of a calf. So this is all because of the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srila Prabhupada, the devotees, that we have this facility for becoming Krishna conscious. So we're not in this category of those four who never surrender. Sometimes we're not so quick to surrender, but in general, the devotees, they want to be under the protection of the Lord. So if we find our mind becoming affected by these lower modes, where we become distressed, full of lamentation and fear, or mode of passion more, we become desirous of more and more. This is a polluted state of mind, And if we cultivate that, then we lose the taste. Here, Prahlad Maharaj is saying, the polluted mind is never satisfied in topics concerning Krishna. And then, therefore, out of humility, he's saying, and therefore I'm most fallen and poor. So this is the typical mood of the acharyas, that they consider themselves that they have no taste. So this we can identify with. But the cure for this no taste is simply given by Srila Rupa Goswami, that for the jaundiced patient, sugar can taste bitter, but if we continue to take it, then we become cured and it gradually becomes sweet again. So that which in spiritual life, if we are averse to something, if we're averse to hearing the pastimes of the Lord, hearing about the activities of the Lord, then just keep on hearing them. That purification will gradually turn that into eagerness. I remember in 1987, I had decided I wanted to finish. I hadn't read the whole Bhagavatam, and I decided I wanted to. I had the opportunity to travel with my spiritual master at that time. I was personal servant, so sometimes he'd been in meetings, or there'd be opportunities for times where I had some time on my hands. So I thought, let me use this time, because I know I wouldn't be doing the service forever. And when I was doing Sanktan before and after, I didn't get so much time to read. So let me try and cram it in. So I had access to one of the small Bhagavatam sets, and then I had the 1-volume Bhagavatam set in the tiny print. And I just used every spare minute that I had. I just pulled Bhagavatam out. It became, to begin with, it was a little bit, I had to kind of force myself to do it, but quickly the momentum was there. And when we get some momentum for Krishna consciousness, we lose that momentum for material consciousness. So this is how we overcome the attraction for material topics or interest in anything materially, is by becoming interested in what's going on in the spiritual world. Never mind what's going on in the material world. Well, let's see the news. Have to see what's going on. And what is the news of the material world? Somebody's fighting with somebody else. Some so-called celebrities divorced from someone else. Some scandals came out. Nothing unusual, really. So therefore, because the material world is only a very, very small percentage of living entities are in the material world, and the vast majority are in the spiritual world, as much as a small minority are in the prison house, and most citizens are walking free because they abide by the laws. This is the example given. Then by hearing and chanting, then gradually we also become freed from this prison house of material world. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was saying that because he was publishing the Sajjana Toshini and some other publications, and he was telling the devotees there should be a daily newspaper, and they were thinking, how can we do daily? He says, never mind daily, it should be a newspaper every moment. There's so much going on in the spiritual world. So we don't know much about it because we have more interest in the material world, but if we take our interest and direct it towards Krishna, then the spiritual world begins to open up. Just like Prabhupada said, these books, pictures in these books, they're windows to the spiritual world. When you look into those windows, the spiritual world starts to open up for you. I remember when I first tried to read Prabhupada's books, I wasn't in a very good state of mind, so I could hardly understand what was being said, but the pictures were so attractive. And just by seeing those pictures, gradually become purified. By seeing these paintings of Krishna interacting with his devotees, you become curious. He's like, what's going on there? It looks like this is something very attractive, very blissful. So Prahlad Maharaj, he's putting himself in a very humble position here in the association of the Lord. He's not being familiar. So similarly, we should be careful not to be familiar with the spiritual master or senior devotees. Don't be so familiar that we take them for granted and then we become critical. Just like when Krishna was on the planet, even some people didn't accept him as God. And two types were there, those who were under Mahamaya and then those who were under Yogamaya. They were, because it would interfere with the pastimes. If they were to think that, just like Mother Yashoda is looking into the mouth of Krishna and she's seeing her thinking that she's the mother of Krishna. But then, just like Arjuna, he wanted to see the two-armed form again after seeing the universal form. And Krishna allows Yogamaya to cover over the devotees in such a way that they can engage in their duties and in their pastimes. But the living entities who are under Mahamaya, then theirs is very, very different. They're forgetting the position of the Lord, not to engage in pastimes with the Lord, but to engage in some rascal lila. We have Rasa Lila and we've got Rascal Lila. Rasa Lila is for the pleasure of the Lord and we simultaneously get pleasure. And Rascal Lila means we're only interested in numero uno, number one. We don't care for anyone else. And if we do, it means that it's because it's related to us, extended selfishness, society, friendship, family, love. But ultimately, all the living entities are connected. So this is the broad-mindedness of the devotee. They think that everybody's part and parcel of Krishna, and they become concerned with everybody, and they're able to administer real compassion by giving transcendental knowledge, which will release them from their lamentation. Asochanam vasochas tvam pragya vadam shabashase gatasan akatasan cha nanu shochanti panditaha. Sri Bhagavan said, while speaking in line of words, you are mourning for that which is not worthy of grief. The wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So in answer to Arjuna's defenses, why he couldn't fight, his reasons, then Krishna, as Prabhupada says in the purport, indirectly calls him, he chastises him, calling him a fool. You're mourning for that which is not worthy of grief. This is a chastisement. So first of all, he puts him right, and then he starts to explain to him, the wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, and nor in the future shall any of yours cease to be. So Prabhupada says, immediately after establishing you're not the body, your spirit, soul, and not only that, but you're an eternal individual. So this is Krishna very quickly explaining to Arjuna the transcendental knowledge of the soul, Atma Gyan. And this is there so that everybody in the material world who is suffering fear and lamentation can understand that what I'm being anxious about is related to something which has nothing to do with me, which is this insubstantial material world. That which has substance in material world, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is the jiva and the holy name. So this is our default reset position, is to always try to be connected to the holy name, either by chanting or by serving. And in this way, we can rise above the fear and lamentation. Anyone get any comments or questions? Yes, Prabhupada.
So we see Bharat Maharaj's life, Uva Maharaj's life, other devotees around it, that they got distracted, say something, and then they received the mercy. Now, Prabhupada Maharaj is saying here that still my mind is extremely sinful and rusty, all of this, but in his character, nowhere it is seen, like since childhood, that he has any of this things in his life. So, what is making him speak like this?
Because Krishna is empowering him to speak like this for our benefit. He's only a 5-year-old boy. What would he know about these things? But because he's elevated soul, then he's speaking this transcendental knowledge. And sometimes the liberated souls, they speak like this for our benefit, like the bhajans of the acharyas. They'll say, I've uselessly wasted my life. But according to what we see, it doesn't look like they have uselessly wasted it. They've lived their life simply as an example of how to engage in devotional service fully. But out of humility, they think that they don't have any attraction for Krishna. So it doesn't seem like someone of that age would have had much exposure to the worldly things. But if we cast our mind back to even before Lord Nrsimhadev appeared, then Prahlad Maharaj was teaching this to his students, so he had knowledge coming from previous lives as well. He's understanding the situation of the spirit soul in the material world, that what is keeping us here is this lust, this harsha shoka, hankering and lament, happiness and distress, and hankering and lamenting. So he's speaking transcendental knowledge about these the effects of the lower modes of material nature and attachment to them. But you see sometimes also the living entities, you see that in their small child form, they may be 3, 4, 5 years old, and they haven't matured to be an adult, so they may not be in knowledge of the type of things that adults get up to. But you can see that they already have qualities which sometimes their parents don't have. They may be carrying qualities from the previous life. Could be better qualities, could be worse. So the journey of the spirit soul in the material world didn't just begin in that one birth. Anyone else like to add anything to that? Is that okay for now? Okay, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Skangaravinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Ki.